Jessica is LGBTQ advisor to government agencies, CEOs, and Ivy League schools. She is the 2022 Hero President's Award recipient as well. And through her work, Jessica sheds light on important issues that are often overlooked, encouraging us to have difficult conversations and to challenge the status quo. She is passionate about promoting culturally competent care with a focus on appreciating the history and impact of stigma that LGBTQ plus people have faced and have overcome. We're about to learn more about how understanding the lived experiences of marginalized communities can help us provide more empathetic and effective care. Please welcome Jessica Hallam.
Thank you so much. It's about to get very gay in here. Is everybody ready for that? I am channeling my middle-aged Jewish older woman who should move to Florida soon with my caftan. It is 30 degrees in this room. I should be in Florida. But of course, many of you might be aware that Florida, a travel advisory has been given out that LGBTQ people are not safe to travel or live in Florida these days. So I just went from very funny to very serious very quickly, and that's what we're going to do today, because that's the story of being an LGBTQ person in America today. It's a game of ping pong. It's back and forth between an incredible day like today when this incredible company, all of you invite me to talk to you about something that's so near and dear to me, that's so important to me, about me and my family and friends, at the same time that I'm being used as a pawn in a political game all around us. So it's actually with quite a heavy heart that I come to you today. I'm usually quite optimistic, and I have to admit today I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. Let's start the slides. I'm hitting the green button. There you go. We're going to have a top 10. So listen, we're going to do this really quickly. There's so much I could say about how great the queer and trans community is. There's so much that I want to share with you. But I've boiled it down into 10 great takeaways. Please do what you can. Tweet it. Take a picture of me. Send it to my father. Let them know that I've actually been here. I'm making everyone proud. I wanted to start with some tips, right? So this is what I do for a living. I've been helping people for over 25 years understand the LGBTQ community, everywhere from healthcare systems to government to small and large businesses. And the number one question I always get asked is about language, terminology, right? I often get asked, just Jessica, tell us what to say, how to say it. I can't remember. It feels like an alphabet soup, right? I get it mixed up. I garble it. I make mistakes. Just why does it keep changing? Doesn't it all seem a little silly, right? And I wanted to start off with just this frame of mind for all of us about language, the power of language. The power of having words to tell people who you are. The power of learning new language to understand ourselves better. Yes, language changes. It changes with the time, with history, depending on our professional environments. Throughout our lifetimes, I've seen the language that I would use to describe myself change. When someone shares the language that they use to describe themselves, it's a gift. It's an act of an authentic, transparent moment to get to know each other better. Thank them for sharing the words that they use. Perhaps it is LGBTQ. That's an acronym you need to remember and learn and practice. If you make a mistake, try it again. Behind every single one of those letters are real people. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer people who have lost their families, who fear losing their jobs. They feel unsafe in their religious institutions that used to be home. Behind every single one of those letters that we might trip over are real people. Number 9, we carry our history with us. I stand in front of you today as a 50-year-old lesbian. 50-year-old lesbian. It thrills me, right? But it does not go unnoticed that I work inside of institutions. I have been inside of every major important hospital. I've worked at Harvard. I worked at I now am at the University of Pennsylvania. These are hospitals that within my lifetime, I would have been institutionalized for being a lesbian. In my lifetime. In my lifetime, people who expressed a gender that was different, that made people uncomfortable, people who had a sexuality or a relationship that made them uncomfortable, they could be institutionalized. Electroshock therapy, lobotomies, in my lifetime. It does not go unnoticed that I am here today to teach you about my people. And within my lifetime, I could have been institutionalized for being different. We carry that history with us. Your smiling colleagues who are members of the LGBTQ plus community, they've got history from their childhood. They've got family trauma. They bring that with them. So we might be smiling and organizing all of your amazing ERGs and your pride activities, but don't forget, we carry that with us, right? And that's part of that hardship, and that's also part of that resilience. Right? So those of you love talking about resilience out there, look to those LGBTQ employees. We are the embodiment, right, of overcoming great adversity and putting on a great party at the same time. It's in the headlines every day, transgender issues. These are real people. You might know transgender people. You might not know that you know transgender people. Transgender people have existed in every country, in every culture, in every religion, all throughout time. We might have used different language to describe them. They might not have had language to describe themselves. But people who push us beyond the gender binary, people who question the stereotypes and the expectations for their own gender, right? People who live as a gender different than that they were assigned at birth. They have always existed. And they are teaching all of us to embody our one life on this earth, to embody our own physical selves in a true collaborative nature with how we feel on the inside, right? They're here. They're a part of us. We love them, and we need to treat them with the respect and dignity that every human being deserves. So, thank you. So, you don't have to know the ins and outs of medicine and science. You don't have to understand the biology of sex and gender to know that transgender people deserve our respect and care. Get out of their way, leave it with doctors, leave it with professionals, and let transgender people thrive. Number 7, we're doing pretty good, y'all. Everyone deserves a family. We had such great conversations today, all through the past couple of days. So many of you thinking about the benefits, right? The benefits that you're providing for all of your employees. And many of the things that we've just touched on really have a lot to do with what you're doing, right? I hope that you see that this isn't just a human rights conversation, but it really comes down to the great work that you're already doing. Whether it's benefits or workplace inclusion, all of the ways that you're thinking about your employees, LGBTQ people are right there with you. They've got lots of the same needs, right? We too have high cholesterol. We too have high blood pressure, right? Most of the time it's higher than it should be. Most of the time we too want to participate in all those programs. And for this one, I love to remind people about what you might call your fertility benefits, right? There's nothing potentially wrong with my fertility. I'm just a lesbian, all right? There's potentially I'm not an infertile woman. Potentially I'm just a lesbian. So hopefully you're doing the math in your head about what I'm missing in my life. It's not an infertility problem. So when you think about this benefit, right, this is a perfect example of how to ensure that you've got real equity in your benefits, right? Again, not equality, not the same for everyone, but what do people need differently? Equity. How to make sure people are getting what they need? Well, do the math, right? You've probably got a fertility benefit that includes you've got to go through 6 months of X, Y, and Z. It's based upon a diagnosis of infertility, yada, yada, yada. I'm not an OBGYN. But I do know that everyone deserves a family. For many people, the desire to have a family is very strong. And that's true for LGBTQ people too. We don't not have that feeling. Many people want to create a family. For many LGBTQ people, getting into a committed relationship or not, right? And having a child or not is an important part of their life. And working in a place that could really find the way for them to have their path to creating a family. So go back and look at your benefits and say, how can we make sure that people in a same-sex relationship or people who are transgender are able to really participate in the beauty of having a family, right? And at the same time, it's important to remember that LGBTQ people are more likely to have had quite trauma with their birth families. So this is an important piece for those of you who work in the DEI space. For people who are in the LGBTQ community, many of us may not be able to go back to our families of origin for that support around being a minoritized person, right? For other folks in other minority or marginalized communities, we go back to our families, they help us figure things out. For those of us in the LGBTQ community, we might not have that, right? And maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a healthy thing, and maybe that's a source of real challenges. It's just something to keep in mind. We'll go quickly through this. Number 6, make mistakes with grace. I hope you notice we're getting into some really good territory that helps you for everything. I am like the queen of putting my foot in my mouth. I will do it probably 10 times before I get on the airplane today, right? I'm taking some risks. I'm putting myself out there just like all of you. Then this is probably, I said that language was the number one thing that people want to talk about. This is probably the second most important topic and popular topic that people want to talk to me about when it comes to LGBTQ issues. They say, Jessica, I'm just afraid of making a mistake, right? I'm just afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm afraid I'm going to do the wrong thing. I'm afraid someone's going to get mad at me. I'm afraid I'm going to get in trouble. I'm afraid I'm going to get sued. I'm afraid someone's going to go to HR. I mean, we're talking about sex right? We're talking about, sex lives potentially of people. That's not something we're supposed to talk about at work. Gender, sex, sexuality, right? We will all make mistakes. I am asking you to try. And if you do make a mistake, which you will, we are learning people. We are trying new things. I just want to offer you the opportunity to make mistakes with grace. If you use the wrong pronoun for a colleague who's changed their pronouns and you slipped and you used the one you used to use and you meant to try using they, them, and you got it wrong and you're about to make a really big deal and tell that great person, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I got that wrong. And oh my gosh, you know how much I appreciate working with you and I promise I'm going to stop. Stop. It's not about you. You made a mistake. I'm sorry. I got that wrong. I'm going to try again. Thank you for correcting me. Let me try again. Even when they're not in the room. Make mistakes with grace. Apologize. Try again. It's easy. It's hard. We get nervous. You're shaking, you get a little sweaty, your face turns red. We make mistakes. Lean into making mistakes, right? The person is going to so appreciate the lights turning off and on. I mean, someone is giving me a sign. I'm not quite, maybe, was that my 1 minute sign? Anyway, let me go quickly. Everyone has a gender. Quickly. You all have a gender. Shoot, I'm only at number 5. You have a gender. I have a gender. Transgender people aren't the only ones who have a gender. They're not the only ones who would like to talk about their gender or talk about how to do gender differently, right? How many women here are frustrated by sexist stereotypes? How many men here were told at a very young age what boys do and don't do. Gender affects all of us. Trans people are just a mirror in our face telling us how terrible some of it is, right? And how they want to break free, and we can too. Break free, everyone. Break free. Number 4. What's it going to be? Sexuality is a healthy part of everyone's life. You're allowed to have a sexuality. You should have a sexuality. Maybe it's that you don't want to have sex. That's fine. We call that asexuality today. That's great. But sexuality is a healthy part of life. I work with doctors. I'm telling you, it's the truth. There is evidence. So supporting each other and knowing and not being afraid. The more we're afraid of talking about sexuality, what do we see? Anyone here know what's going on with sexually transmitted infections in the United States? You think that's not going to affect our workplaces? Anyone know what's going on with the ability to have a pregnancy, or when pregnancy goes wrong, or if you don't want to stay pregnant? Sexuality is a healthy part of our life. And the more we're afraid to talk about it, right? The more we're afraid to be open and honest. It really looks like some people are on the spot here right now. I'm about to call on you and talk about your sexuality. We're not going to do that. Let's move on. Not quite sure what's going on with the purple light. It's very dramatic. We measure what matters. You probably don't even ask who is a member of the LGBTQ community in your workplace. You probably don't even ask, right? The federal government is going to ensure that we're asking gender identity correctly. That means including a non-binary category. That means finding out if people want to tell you that they are transgender. That means allowing people to tell you, if you're in a healthcare setting especially, the difference between their sex assigned at birth and their current gender identity. It's easy. Don't be afraid. I'll tell you how to do it after the talk. I promise I won't even charge you $1 million. We measure what matters. If you don't ask me, I think I don't count. If you don't count me, I don't count. We measure what matters. You are sending a signal every day by being afraid to ask people about sexual orientation and gender identity. You are sending the message that you're afraid and that I don't count. Start asking. Number 2, if you have no idea what the heck I'm talking about, if you don't know what's going on in this world, half the states right now are passing statewide bans on everything that has to do with me, my family, and those that I love. You don't have to understand to practice empathy and to know that politicians are cruel and mean. You don't have to want to go to a drag brunch to know that drag queens are no one's enemy, right? Drag queens are no one's enemy. This does not have to be your issue before today. This doesn't have to be in your family. You don't have to, I'm not going to give you some certificate that tells you you're ready to step up. You're practicing empathy. You know when people are being cruel and unkind and ruthless and mean. You know it. And that brings me to my last point. I need you more than you have ever done before to be loud right now. People's lives are on the line. You do not have to understand everything to know what's right and what's wrong. You don't have to know the right thing to do to say to your team, let's sit down and rewrite these forms. Let's sit down and review our benefits. Let's figure out how we can do more. You've got a couple weeks coming up, a couple months before it's